Professor. My name is Katherine, and I'm joined today with my partner Hayley, and we are here to present to you our consumer behavior research project for MK620, and we have entitled our project the Millennial Marketplace. So let's dive into it. All right, so first we have our hypothesis. So we broke it down into our overall hypothesis, and then we also have a few sub-hypotheses as well. So our overall hypothesis is that millennials are at a disadvantage in the home buying market due to student loan debt. Both Hayley and myself are millennials, so we know that student loan debt is a real issue in today's world, especially for millennials. School is getting more and more expensive. Not only from a tuition standpoint, but textbooks, the technology needed for school, the commute back and forth, room and board, etc. It's all just increasing and adding to that student loan debt. And additionally, when people are graduating, many times people are not finding jobs, or they're not finding jobs that can offset that student loan debt. So they're just digging themselves into an even deeper hole with that student loan debt. And lastly, many students, especially millennials, are choosing to stay in school longer, getting that graduate degree or getting that doctorate, which is adding even more debt to their wallet. So then for our sub-hypothesis, we have three of them. The first one being that millennials who receive financial support are more likely to be able to purchase a home. So are these millennials, even if they do move out of their house, are they getting financial support from a friend or family member? Maybe their parents are paying their rent or offsetting some of their bills by covering some of their expenses. The second one being millennials are more apt to believe that their student loan debt will affect their ability to purchase a home than non-millennials. So many times the millennial generation is kind of seen as that woe is me generation to non-millennials, to the older generation. So is it just that millennials believe that the student loan debt is affecting their ability, or is it everybody? Or is it true that non-millennials really do believe that millennials are just that woe is me generation? And then lastly, millennials are more likely to believe their individuality and personality traits play a role in their ability to purchase a home. So really taking it on themselves, is it a case-by-case basis where if a millennial is very motivated and they may have a lot of student loan debt, but they're working up that corporate ladder and they're making a lot of money, are they able to utilize their personality traits and their individuality to offset those student loan costs? All right, so we did have a few research methodology that we utilized. The first was we went online. So as millennials, we rely on that beautiful source of Google to find really a ton of information on the internet. So as you'll see at the end of the presentation, we use multiple resources just to first gather some information on millennials. Although Hayley and I are both millennials, we are very different, and the millennial age gap ranges over 20 years. So there's a wide variety of what is considered a millennial. So we really need to do some research into what that was. Then for quantitative data collection, we did do an online survey via SurveyMonkey and had over 100 responses to that survey. And that survey incorporated roughly 25 questions that we asked each person to answer. And then for our qualitative data collection, I was able to actually reach out to somebody from my CrossFit gym and have a personal interview with her. So she is actually an assistant vice president, a mortgage originator at Ion Bank, and she's been working in the mortgage industry for over 20 years and also has been in the baking industry for over 30 years. So she had a lot of great insight that we were able to utilize for this project. All right, so millennials, who are they? What is their demographic and their information? So millennials are people that are born between 1980 and 2000. They're also known as Generation Y. There's currently about 80 million in the United States and 2.5 billion worldwide. They're seen as the most ethnically and racially diverse group of a generation. So they also grew up alongside technology. I can remember having the dial-up internet probably when I was about 8 to 10 years old. So we definitely have grown up with technology. I remember asking for a cell phone when I was in about 7th grade. So we're also a dominance on social media networks. So whether it's Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Instagram, there's all these online presence that are dominated by millennials, and people are actually able to make careers out of their presence on social media. So one really cool statistic in this image that you'll see is the percent of the workforce that's going to be millennials. So 50% by 2020, which is only 3 years away, and then 75% by 2030. And all of these people are aspiring to make a difference. They really want to have their voice heard. They have very high expectations for themselves, and they're very achievement oriented. All right, so just a little bit more into millennials. So as I mentioned, we grew up with technology, but we also have grown up in a time of rapid change. So we have a different set of priorities and expectations from previous generations. We have that kind of I want it now attitude. We also have different attitudes towards ownership that have spawned what's being called a sharing economy. So millennials aren't having that need to own things. They would rather rent things. You see things like Uber and Airbnb, these type of companies that are coming out that show they don't even need to have the name brand when they just have a hotel room or when they're taking a taxi cab. They really have no need for ownership. So I always think of the show on HGTV called Tiny Houses, where people are spending less money on a house than they would for a car because they don't want to be burdened with that debt, with that mortgage. So they're spending less money as well versus previous generations. They actually spend 64% compared to previous generations as of 2012. And more of their money is going to student loan debt. So an average student loan debt is almost $21,000 for a 25-year-old in the United States, which is a pretty penny, and it definitely packs a punch when it comes to somebody having debt. And they also have different priorities versus non-millennials. They're slower to get married. People are getting married later in life or not getting married at all. They're very focused on their careers. And they're also slower to move out on their own. So they're living at home longer, saving their money up, and not wasting their income they do have on a mortgage payment.
All right, so now we are going to move on into millennials, specifically in the housing marketplace. So overall, millennials in the marketplace are looking to alternative options, as Kate mentioned, when it comes to large purchases. We've seen this, obviously, in the emergence of the sharing economy, where a new set of services are out in the market to provide access to products without the burden of ownership. This, in turn, has prompted millennials to have that reluctance to buy luxury items and make those large, expensive purchases like buying a home. The question that millennials ask is, why incur the whole expense when you can share that expense with others and use that money to save or to pay for other bills, like those sometimes high and expensive student loan payments. So one of the goals in our research was really to discover whether or not millennials would have an interest in purchasing a home during what was traditionally considered the peak home buying years. So in the past, with previous generations, at age 25, you entered peak home buying years, but were less likely to purchase a home after age 45. Still, because of the sheer size of the millennial generation and their desire to eventually, although not immediately, settle down, the housing marketplace can and should expect an increase in home sales, hopefully when millennials are a little bit more comfortable with their financial portfolios. Our secondary research also found that millennials are currently renting for a median of 6 years prior to buying. Since 93% of current renters aged 18 to 34 plan to buy a home in the future, we can speculate that, again, the housing market will see many millennials investing in a home down the line. Also, in 2010, about 30% of millennials were still living at home with their parents, according to Experian. Our survey found that only 15.7% of respondents were living somewhere free of charge, presumably with their parents. Also, 41.2% had already purchased a home, either a condo or a house, and 43.1% were still renting. This indicates that some millennials have already invested in a home and presumably acquired a mortgage, but a small majority are still considering that option while currently paying a housing expense. To understand when these millennials might purchase a home, we also took a look at their current motivations and fears. Millennials are exceptionally motivated to ensure that the money they do have is well spent, which means that they also want to ensure they're making a sound financial investment when it comes to purchasing a home. This is extremely important, as the vast majority of home buyers between the ages of 25 and 34 are first-time buyers. In addition, first-time millennial home buyers are worried about the financial implications of purchasing a home, which includes saving for a down payment as well as finding a home within their budget. And I am going to pass it back to Kate to go over some of the qualitative results from our survey, actually from her personal interview.
Thanks, Hayley. So, like Hayley mentioned, I'm just going to quickly go over the qualitative results that I found from my personal interview with Diane. So, as I mentioned before, she is the Assistant Vice President, a mortgage originator at IM Bank. She has 30 years experience in banking and 20 years in mortgage, so she had a lot of really great information for us. So from her personal point of view, there's a lot of information on this slide, but I just want to touch on a few things. She's seen the cost of education skyrocket during her 35 years, and she estimates that the average student loan debt is around $40,000. That's been her experience. I know that previously, in an earlier slide, I said in 2012, the average amount was around $20,000, but she would guess around 40. She does believe that student loan debt is putting millennials at a disadvantage in the home buying market, so she does support our hypothesis. So the one thing that she spoke to me very much about was the debt to income ratio, and the fact that student loan debt is really causing a huge issue with the DTI ratio, because even if a student loan is in deferment, if a person's in grad school or doctorate school or just doing a further undergrad, even if that student loan debt is in deferment, it's still counted to your DTI ratio, which needs to be at a 43% threshold in order to be approved for a mortgage. So what she was saying is that they're seeing that these student loan debts, because they're so high, they're making people fall over that threshold and not be able to be approved for a mortgage, even though they probably have a rent that is very comparable to the price of what their mortgage is going to be, and they very well know that they can afford to have that mortgage. They're still not getting approved because their DTI ratio does not fall within that threshold. So she says, as a mortgage originator, it's extremely frustrating because they have these millennials that are sitting there making money. They have enough money to pay for that mortgage, but they're unable to because their DTI ratio falls over that 43%. So it was a really great interview with her. We got a lot of insight into the frustrations that they deal with because of student loan debt. So I will turn it back over to Hayley to go over some of our survey findings.
All right. So starting with some overall highlights from our survey, this quantitative research found that non-millennials are less likely to agree that the millennial generation is at a disadvantage when they're purchasing a home. Rather, it's millennials themselves who believe that they are at a disadvantage in the current housing market. So as we see on the slide, the non-millennials we surveyed, 56% of them came back and said that millennials are not at a disadvantage in the housing marketplace, while 72% of millennials think that they are at a disadvantage when it comes to purchasing a home. Diving a little bit deeper into our sub-hypotheses, our survey showed that the perceptions of financial support on millennials when it comes to preparing them for purchasing a home found that 21% of non-millennials and 30% of millennials indicate that they're currently receiving financial support. However, even though a large percentage of respondents do not admit to giving or receiving financial support, about 64% collectively believe that financial support plays a role in the millennials' ability to purchase a home in today's marketplace. Moving on to our findings on student loan debt, we were able to gather information about the impact of student loan debt on the millennials' ability to purchase a home. Of the 67% of millennials who completed our survey, 67% of the millennials who completed our survey admit to having student loan debt. Now, 88% of that group indicate that they have more than $25,000 in debt from their undergraduate and graduate courses. So definitely similar to the results from Kate's personal interview, we saw a lot of millennials with upwards of $35,000 to $75,000 in student loan debt. Due to this large amount of debt per student, millennials have become conditioned to attribute their disadvantage in the housing market and financially overall to student loan debt. Furthermore, 69% fully believe that they will not be able to purchase a home because they will be unable to amass enough savings to put a down payment on a home in the near future, possibly even within the next 10 years. Lastly, we were also able to conclude that the perception of both non-millennials and millennials is that a consumer's personality does factor into the likelihood that the consumer will be able to purchase a home. When we looked at the specific personality traits that are perceived to enable a customer to buy a home, determination was listed as playing an important role in whether or not a consumer would be able to buy a home. That is 86% of non-millennials and 80% of millennials believe determination plays a role in the home buying process. Additionally, 68% of non-millennials and 62% of millennials indicated that they believe consumers who are not averse to risk would be more likely and more able to purchase a home. And back to you, Kate, for our conclusion.
Thanks, Hayley. So just to wrap up our presentation, we did have a few kind of final thoughts to our conclusion. So as our hypothesis stated, we do believe that we proved our hypothesis that student loan debt does affect a person's ability to purchase a home. However, we do have a stipulation that how much it affects one's ability varies on many individual factors. So some of these factors include employment status. So do they have a job? Do they have money coming in? Their household income. It was pretty interesting to see if a person's living alone versus living with a spouse, where they can have a dual income, how that played into ownership of a home. Financial support, which we talked about before. Do you have support from either a family member or a friend, etc.? And then also your personal abilities. Are you a go-getter? Are you working towards moving up the corporate ladder? Are you making money in different ways? There's so many various ways that you can have a full-time job and also make money on the side on top of that. Driving for Uber. There's a dog sitting site where you can dog sit for money from rover.com, etc. There's so many ways to make money. So how much of a go-getter, how much are they trying to achieve by earning more money so they can purchase a home? So we started to realize that yes, student loan debt plays a huge factor in if somebody can purchase a home, but there's a lot of individual factors that play into that as well. So another conclusion was that millennials perceive student loan debt as a major factor for not purchasing a home, but in our survey we found that 40% of millennials own a home. So again, while they do perceive their student loan debt as a major factor for not purchasing a home, because of those individual factors, we had over a third of our survey respondents that were millennials are also home owners. But on the flip side, that means about 60% are not homeowners. So it does support our hypothesis as well. So also we found that there are other factors besides student loan debt that may be playing a role in a millennial's decision to not purchase a home. Some examples that we mentioned early in their presentation, they're staying in school longer, so they know that they're building that additional student loan debt, so they may forego purchasing a home because of that. They're focusing on their career, so they're trying to, work those long hours. They may be moving a lot because people do tend to bounce around in their careers now. Millennials are not known for staying at one company for very long, so they may be moving across the country and they don't want to be burdened by that mortgage and that ownership in a state they may be leaving soon. Also, people are not getting married until later in life or not at all. So like I mentioned, with that dual household income, people that are married, for the most part in today's world, both people are working, so they have that dual income. So if they're not getting married until later in life, they may live on their own and they don't have that financial support from another person. And then lastly, as of 2015, 66% of millennials haven't reached the average home buying age of 31, and 22% are under 25 years old. So that statistic really stood out to us because we're just getting started with millennials in the home buying market. So as we mentioned, while student loan debt does affect a millennial's ability to purchase a home, there's so many individual factors, especially those factors that show that they're kind of delaying that part of their life. It will be very interesting to see what happens in the future as more and more millennials enter kind of that prime home buying age. Will they start buying homes? Maybe it's not that they're not buying homes, it's that they're delaying the purchase of homes. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what happens in the marketplace over the next few years as those millennials get older and older. So that is our presentation. We found it extremely eye-opening. There's so many individual factors, as we mentioned, that go into whether or not a millennial can afford a home. And we had a ton of resources that we were able to utilize for this. Not only the quantitative data that we were able to get with the survey and the amazing resources that we had online, that personal interview with Diane was really beneficial for us, and having that qualitative data and being able to really have her break it down from a personal perspective was awesome. So we had a ton of fun doing this project. We really wanted to thank you, Professor, for allowing us to do this. It's been a great run and a great 7 weeks. And Hayley, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add before we close it out.
Yeah, this project was definitely eye-opening. It's great to learn and understand a little bit more about what some of our peers are dealing with in the housing marketplace. I know I've been fortunate enough to have my spouse, my husband, and we've bought a home in the last couple of years, but it was definitely not without its challenges. And I think anything financial overall for millennials is and can be a little bit difficult. So this was a great project to really dive into some of those financial challenges and see really not only what other millennials believe, but what non-millennials believe as well. All right, and that is it. I will make sure that these slides are attached to our submission so that you can go through them, Professor. But other than that, thank you so much for a great 7 weeks, and we look forward to getting your feedback on our project.